Hey everybody, it's Dave. So what we're going to do today is go through the video that I had sent out to everybody. There's a lot going on here, and although it is a Major League Baseball play, what we want to concern ourselves with is how the Little League rule book would be applied to this. So you've all had a chance to see the video, hopefully, but I'm going to try and make this viewable in our side. I don't know how well from a technology standpoint this is going to come through when we post it to YouTube, but nonetheless, let's go ahead and spare a few moments and watch the video.
Ibar, big bouncer down the first base line, and it's picked up by Otero. And Otero and Ibar run into each other, and they're going to give him first base.
So they gave him first base on that. Okay, we're going to see this again in a couple of different replays. I want you to pay attention to where the fielders are. We're going to take this as an example, as if we did have the ability to watch the replay and make a rule. Certainly in real time, man, it's just a cluster. But what we want to do here is be able to watch this all the way through and see exactly what's going on. So let's continue on with the video.
And Bob Melvin storming out of the dugout. And this call has controversy written all over it. The two fielders, Moss and Otero, were right next to each other.
Well, look where Ibar is. He runs in out of the baseline, and he runs into them. If he's running the outside, he actually causes a collision by running inside on the grass. Wow. And they could say he's changing direction to avoid a collision, but he caused the collision.
Yeah, and he may have been.
So what do we have here? We've got a lot going on. The commentators brought up a lot of good points, okay? But the first thing, what do you think is going to happen next? So we have to make, first of all, a couple of assumptions. Right? Let's go under the assumption that we have Little League managers that know what they're talking about. Certainly not always the case, but let's take that into consideration for this use case. So what's the next thing that happens after this play completes? This. Okay, you've got Skippy coming out, charging out of the dugout, wanting to get in your face and explain his point of view. So let's look at some of the viewpoints here. Basically, there's going to be three viewpoints and outcomes of this potential play. The first is, what does the offensive manager want? Okay, he's the guy, the manager for the team at bat. He wants the batter runner safe at first. He wants the safe here. He doesn't want an out, of course. The defensive manager, what do you think he wants? Well, of course, he wants the opposite. He wants the batter runner out. When we look at this now, what does the umpire want? Well, we all know that the umpire wants an out, but the reality is that we should want to make the right call. Okay? So let's continue down this rabbit hole and break these things down a little bit further, starting with their arguments. First off, the defensive manager. What's he going to explain or attempt to scream at you or attempt to use to convince you that he should have an out on the play? Well, what's the first thing? Running lane violation. Okay, the batter was clearly out of the running lane. He did not have all of his body within the last stretch of the 45-foot, in this case it's a 90-foot diamond, so in the last 45 feet before first base, he was clearly outside of that space. He was out of the baseline. Well, that kind of is like the running lane violation, but we'll leave that up there anyway. Interference. Okay, there was interference on the batter runner. We'll explore that in a moment as well. And there was contact with the fielder. He ran into the guy. So does that factor in? He should be out for contacting the fielder. So let's take a look at some of these things. Now, the offensive manager, they want that batter runner safe. There's no doubt. He's going to scream obstruction. Okay? And he's going to scream obstruction. So let's break this down again a little bit further. First off, let's talk about the running lane violation. A batter is out when, in running the last half of the distance from home base to first base, while the ball is being fielded to first base, the batter runner runs outside or inside. Blah, blah, blah. In so doing, interferes with the fielder taking the throw at first base. Okay? However, you can't avoid a fielder. Well, we got a couple things going on. Was there a throw to first base? No. Did he avoid the fielder? No. So we've got no running lane violation here. Let's look at the next thing. Was he out of the baseline? Well, a runner is out, and this is Rule 708A1. Running more than 3 feet from his or her baseline to avoid being tagged. To avoid being tagged. unless such action is to avoid interference with a fielder fielding a batted ball. So it's not really out of the baseline. He's not avoiding a tag, so you can't really get him out for running way outside the base path or way outside the baseline to avoid a tag, so that doesn't apply. What about interference? Now, there's a couple of things here when you start talking about interference. Interference has really a broad brush. So let's look at offensive interference. And this is an act by any member of the team at bat which interferes with, obstructs, impedes, hinders, or confuses any fielder attempting to make a play. Did he obstruct, impede, hinder, or confuse the fielder? No. The fielders kind of collided. One of them came up with the ball. In this case, fielder one, the pitcher, had the ball. So there was a little bit of a collision, but there's no interference there. What about this? Any runner is out when he intentionally interferes with a thrown ball or hinders a fielder attempting to make a play on a batted ball. Did he get in the way of the guy making a play? No. The pitcher had already made the play. So, do we have interference? 708B. We don't have anything there. Okay, what about contact with the fielder? Well, the Little League rule book is pretty specific on this, and this is 708A3. The runner does not slide or attempt to get around the fielder who has the ball and is waiting to make a tag. So, did he attempt to get around the fielder who had the ball and was waiting even for that split second to make the tag? No. So we've got a potential contact with the fielder situation here. So the defensive manager for the out has a valid argument. Now let's take a look at what the offensive manager is going to scream about obstruction. Looking at Rule 2.0, the definition of obstruction is the act of a fielder who, while not in possession of the ball, impedes the progress of any runner. A fake tag is considered obstruction. Let's take careful look at the note where it says, obstruction shall be called on a defensive player who blocks off a baseline, or home plate from a base runner while not in possession of the ball. Did we have obstruction? Well, you had the first baseman coming down the line. Granted, he was attempting to make a play on the ball, but he didn't. The pitcher was the player who made the play on the ball. Where was the first baseman? If you want to go back and look at the video, go ahead, but I guarantee you he was standing right on the foul line. So, do we have obstruction? Yeah. Okay, just note from this rule, though, there is complete lack of any text regarding intentional or unintentional. Obstruction doesn't have to be intentional. In most cases, it is unintentional. Somebody is in the way of the runner, okay? And it's obstruction. So now we've got two situations here. We've got contact with the fielder, and we've got obstruction. Now what's the umpire got to do? He's got to sort this mess out, and he's got to figure out what the right rule should be. Now, I've given you the facts. At this point, this interpretation is purely mine. As much as I would love to take an out here, what's going to take precedence? Okay? First of all, let's take a look and entertain this hypothetical situation. If fielder 3, the first baseman, wasn't in the baseline, the fielder would not have had to avoid him. Therefore, there would not have been any contact. The batter runner obviously initiating the contact has no bearing on this since it was caused by the obstruction. So the batter runner had to avoid the fielder, in this case the first baseman, who was standing in the baseline without the ball. Now, if the batter runner attempted in any way to knock the ball out of the pitcher's hand or glove or whatever, we could call interference and he would be out there. However, we're going to rule obstruction on this. There's nothing in the obstruction rule that has anything to do with another fielder attempting to make a play. It doesn't matter. The play had been made. There was a fielder in the base path. It's unfortunate. It's unintentional. It happened. But we've got obstruction, and you're going to award the batter runner first base. Your mechanic is pretty straightforward. First off, time, hands up and out. That's obstruction, pointing at fielder 3. You, pointing at the batter runner, first base and pointing at first base, and sell that. Be emphatic. So if you go back and you actually look at that video one more time, you're going to see exactly what happened. And that Major League Baseball umpire, again, we're applying Little League rules here, but in my impression, that umpire got it right, and he got it right in a split second. That's why they're pros. Thanks for your time, guys.